In 2022, I climbed to the summit of MERA Peak at 6,476 metres. MERA Peak is often described as the world's highest trekking peak and is found in the Everest region of Nepal. Since getting back, I have been inundated with questions about my trip, and I thought it's about time that I got round to answering some of them. I'm Callum and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by, and I really hope you find this video useful, especially if you're thinking about a trip to Nepal, MERA Peak, or any of the other 6,000 metre Himalayan peaks. So let's dive in with the question that I get asked the most. What is the food like on the trek and climb? The food in general was fantastic. I'm still amazed at what was capable in some really extreme environments. Some of the best food I have ever eaten was when I was in Nepal. Some of the highlights of the trip included pizza in the village of Kari at 5,000 metres, a cheese sandwich complete with tatty wedges, and the portions were always massive.
That's just so much.
Noodles and rice were plentiful, as was potatoes. The vegetables were usually cabbage and carrots, as these are easier to grow at higher altitudes. There wasn't a lot of meat, which isn't a problem for me because I don't eat meat anyway. Tea and coffee were plentiful, and we'd stop every couple of hours on the trek for a cup of tea. Snacks were also available at every tea house, and you could stock up on fizzy juice, beer and rum if you wanted to. I took a pile of snack bars with me, but I ended up donating most of them to the porters and the guides because I was so well fed on the trek and climb that I didn't even need them.
That's Friday.
As you go higher, bottled water becomes more expensive. But this wasn't too much of a problem because I had a pretty good supply of water purification tablets with me, and cold and hot water was available at every tea house. Next question. Was it hard? Yeah, it was. It was the most mentally and physically demanding activity that I've ever undertaken. Even though MERA is described as a trekking peak, it's far from straightforward. The extreme altitude makes even the simplest of tasks feel really difficult.
Just sat there like, oh, that's not done.
And we took the scenic route into the mountain, taking 10 days to trek in and 2 days to climb to the summit. You need to be physically fit and you need to believe it. You also need to have some proficiency in the use of crampons and other technical gear. So yeah, it was hard, but, and I still maintain, that if you prepare yourself properly, if you believe in yourself, then there's absolutely no reason why the summit can't be achievable. Next question, how did you find the altitude? I'd watched loads of YouTube videos before going to Nepal, and I'd also climbed Kilimanjaro in 2018, so I thought I knew what being at altitude was going to be like, but nothing prepares you for the effects of high altitude.
Just touched 5,000 and it feels good.
It affects everyone differently, and what happens to me might not necessarily happen to you. What I learned was that my body actually coped reasonably well being at high altitude, and this was down to the fact that we had a good long acclimatisation, taking 10 days to trek in before attempting the summit. And we would trek high and we would sleep low. And I was also taking Diamox as a precaution. But that doesn't mean that you should take Diamox, and you should probably consult your doctor before taking it.
So here we are at the top of our acclimatisation walk. It's 300 metres above Kari, which puts us about 5 to 50.
I also didn't experience any severe headaches at all while on the climb and trek, but that does not mean that I found it easy. Far from it.
That's one of the hardest things I've ever done.
The lack of oxygen means that your muscles fatigue quicker and your rate of recovery is significantly slower. You sometimes feel like your lungs just aren't big enough, and trying to catch your breath takes you longer than you think it will.
And I couldn't breathe, and my legs felt like they weren't working.
The key lesson for me was that I had to take the pace slow and steady. On summit night, I actually came off of the group rope and I walked at my own pace. So while I started slower than everyone else, I actually overtook them on the summit ridge. Next question, how much experience do you need? Well, I'm living proof that you don't need to be an experienced mountaineer or even the most physically fit person in the world to achieve really cool things in the big mountains. For me, I only had one other comparison, and that was Kilimanjaro, but it would be unfair to compare the two mountains because they are so different. However, I do think having had the experience on Kilimanjaro in 2018, it did allow me to understand some of the effects of high altitude and how I would react to that. As for my technical ability, I would say I have a slight advantage because I live in Scotland and we have some of the best wee mountains in the world. All the skills and equipment that I use for winter mountaineering in Scotland are directly transferable to MERA, especially when it comes to ice axe use and crampon use. That being said, I don't actually think you need that much experience in order to attempt MERA. Our guides were incredibly knowledgeable and gave us tuition as we progressed up the mountain. Next question, how much gear or equipment do I need? Not as much as you think, or maybe slightly more than you think. It really depends on where you are in your own journey to climb big mountains. This is probably the hardest question to answer because there's so much variety and opinions when it comes to gear and equipment for climbing big mountains. And in truth, I think what I'll probably do is do a separate video on the gear I used at some point in the future. Next question, how much does it cost? For complete transparency, more than you think. But it should be said that what you get in terms of value for money is extremely good, in my opinion. So my trip was a total of 23 days, 4 of which we spent in Kathmandu and 19 we spent in the mountains. The trip cost was £3,700 and that included the flights. Other costs involved were insurance, which was £120. I spent £300 on tips, and I also spent around £1,000 on buying new gear and hiring equipment specifically for this trip. I also budgeted around £500 for spending money. In total, the whole trip cost around the £5,500 mark. One thing to look out for when booking a trip to the Himalayas and Nepal is how many nights accommodation in Kathmandu is included in your trip. Because if you end your time in the mountains early, you will be out of pocket for the extra night's accommodation before your departing flight. It's not a massive issue because most good hotels in Nepal you can get for around about £30 or £40 per night. So next question, did you use a UK company or did you use a Nepalese company? So we booked our trip through Adventure Peaks here in the UK, but when we got to Nepal, we realised that they use an in-country operator called Makalu Adventure. Now, I cannot speak highly enough about Makalu Adventure, and in particular their owner Mohan. Everyone from the staff at the hotel to the guides and porters were absolutely incredible. They were dedicated to their jobs and they were supremely organised. They really did do everything they could to make our trip the best possible experience that it could be. If I'm being completely honest, if I'd have known that Adventure Peaks was going to subcontract the trip to Makalu Adventure, I'd have just went straight to Makalu Adventure in the first place. I also did a bit of research, and going direct to Makalu Adventure rather than using Adventure Peaks would have actually saved us £1,500, but we would have still have had the exact same experience. When I go back to Nepal, I'll be going direct with Makalu Adventure, and I would highly recommend them. So if you are thinking about a trip to Nepal or the Himalayas, whether that be trekking or climbing the big mountains, I would urge you to check them out. Final question, would you go back to Nepal? In a heartbeat, yes. I'd go back tomorrow if I could. And I'm actually in the planning process of my next big trip, which will see me return to Nepal. But all will be revealed in due course. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope you found it useful, and if you have, please do let me know. If there's any questions that I haven't answered, if you want to ask me them, please feel free to write in the comments. If I get enough questions, who knows, I might do a follow-up video. If not, I will do my absolute best to answer them. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on another adventure soon.